The Volga River, a silver ribbon across the vast Russian landscape, was more than just a geographical feature. It was a lifeline, a vital artery that sustained the Soviet Union. This mighty river, winding through the heart of Russia, was a symbol of strength and endurance. Along its banks stood Stalingrad, a bustling city named for the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Factories in Stalingrad churned out tanks and guns, essential for the Red Army fighting desperately against Hitler's invasion. These factories were the backbone of the Soviet war effort, producing the machinery that would be used to defend the motherland. Few could have imagined that this city, with its industrial might, would become a symbol of human resilience and the graveyard of an army. Stalingrad was more than just factories, it was a testament to Soviet ingenuity and determination. It was home to ordinary people, families, workers, students. Life in Stalingrad had been disrupted by the war, but the spirit of its people remained unbroken. They still held on to hope, clinging to the belief that peace would return. Little did they know that their city would soon be swallowed by the most savage battle in history. The fate of their nation, and perhaps the world, would hinge on what happened on the banks of the Volga. The streets that once echoed with the laughter of children and the hum of daily life would soon be filled with the sounds of war. The resilience of Stalingrad's people would be tested in ways they could never have imagined, and their courage would become legendary. Before the battle began, Stalingrad was strategically significant. The tractor factory in the north produced vital tanks for the Soviet forces. The grain elevator, a towering structure, was a key defensive position. The Red October steel plant, located in the heart of the city, was crucial for manufacturing weapons and machinery. These locations would become focal points in the brutal urban warfare that was to come. The German Sixth Army, under General Paulus, aimed to capture these strategic sites to cripple Soviet production and gain control of the Volga River, cutting off vital supply lines. The Soviet defenders, aware of the importance of these locations, prepared to defend them at all costs. By the summer of 1942, Hitler's armies were deep inside the Soviet Union. They had pushed through vast territories, capturing cities and villages, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Their advance had been swift and brutal, but the Red Army, though battered, refused to break. Soviet soldiers and civilians alike showed incredible resilience, fighting fiercely to defend their homeland. Hitler's generals urged caution, warning of the dangers of overextending their lines. They knew the harsh Russian winter and the tenacity of the Soviet forces could spell disaster, but Hitler, ever the gambler, craved a decisive victory. His eyes fell upon Stalingrad, a city of immense strategic and symbolic importance. Capturing the city that bore Stalin's name would be a propaganda coup, crushing Soviet morale. It would be a blow to the Soviet leader's prestige and a psychological victory for the Nazis. It would also give Germany control of the Volga, cutting off vital supplies flowing from the south. The Volga was a lifeline for the Soviet Union, and controlling it would choke off resources and reinforcements. On August 23, 1942, the Luftwaffe unleashed a devastating air bombardment. The skies over Stalingrad were filled with the roar of engines and the whistle of falling bombs. Waves of German bombers turned Stalingrad into a sea of fire and rubble. Buildings crumbled and the city was engulfed in flames, marking the beginning of one of the most brutal battles in history. The battle for the city on the Volga had begun. It would be a grueling, drawn-out conflict, with both sides pouring in men and material, fighting street by street, house by house, in a desperate struggle for control. The German Sixth Army, confident after its victories, expected a quick capture of Stalingrad. They were in for a rude awakening. The Red Army, bolstered by reinforcements and Stalin's order to defend the city to the death, fought back with ferocious determination. What followed was a new kind of warfare, a brutal struggle for every street, every building, every floor. Tanks were useless in the rubble-strewn streets, reduced to sitting ducks for anti-tank guns and Molotov cocktails. Soldiers fought hand-to-hand in the sewers and cellars, the air thick with the stench of death and cordite. In this urban labyrinth, snipers on both sides turned the ruins into their hunting grounds. One name became legendary. Vasily Zaitsev, a shepherd from the Ural Mountains turned deadly marksman. Zaitsev was credited with over 200 kills, striking fear into the hearts of German soldiers. His exploits, whether entirely accurate or embellished in propaganda, became symbolic of the desperate struggle for survival that characterized Stalingrad. Every crack in a wall, every shattered window could hide a sniper, making every move a gamble with death. Section 5. Operation Uranus. The Soviet trap springs shut. While the Germans were bogged down in Stalingrad, the Soviets were planning a counteroffensive. Operation Uranus, named for the seventh planet from the Sun, aimed to exploit the weak flanks of the German advance. On November 19, 1942, Soviet tanks burst through the thinly held Romanian lines north and south of Stalingrad. The Germans, overstretched and exhausted, were caught completely off guard. Within days, the two pincers met east of the city, trapping the 6th Army and elements of the 4th Panzer Army inside a shrinking pocket. Section 6. A frozen hell, encirclement and desperation. The German 6th Army, once a proud fighting force, was now trapped. Winter set in with a vengeance. Temperatures plummeting far below freezing. Food, ammunition and medical supplies dwindled. The Luftwaffe attempted to supply their encircled comrades by air, but it was not enough. Starvation and disease ravaged the ranks as desperately needed supplies fell into Soviet hands. The sky, once filled with the roar of German aircraft, now echoed with the rumble of Soviet artillery. Section 7. No retreat, Hitler's fatal order. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, commander of the 6th Army, pleaded with Hitler for permission to break out. But Hitler, obsessed with holding Stalingrad, refused. He believed that the Luftwaffe could resupply the 6th Army and that a relief force could break through the Soviet encirclement. This proved to be a fatal miscalculation. The Luftwaffe airlift failed miserably, and a desperate attempt by the 4th Panzer Army to relieve Stalingrad was repulsed. The 6th Army was doomed. By January 1943, the German situation in Stalingrad was utterly hopeless. The once formidable German 6th Army, which had been a symbol of Nazi military prowess, was now trapped in a deadly vice. Reduced to eating horses and even rats to survive, the soldiers were desperate. Supplies had long since run out, and the harsh winter only compounded their misery. Ravaged by frostbite and disease, the men were in a dire state. Medical supplies were scarce, and the wounded lay in makeshift hospitals with little hope of recovery. The once mighty 6th Army was now a shadow of its former self. Exhausted, emaciated, and clad in tattered uniforms, the soldiers could barely muster the strength to continue fighting. On January 31st, General Friedrich Paulus made a fateful decision. Disobeying Hitler's direct orders to fight to the last man, he surrendered the remnants of his beleaguered army to the Soviets. It was a stunning victory for the Soviets, marking a significant turning point in the war. The Red Army's triumph at Stalingrad boosted Soviet morale and signaled the beginning of the end for Nazi ambitions in the East. The myth of German invincibility was shattered. Propaganda that had once depicted the Wehrmacht as unstoppable now seemed hollow in the face of such a devastating defeat. Of the nearly 300,000 German soldiers who had crossed the Don River with high hopes of capturing Stalingrad, only around 91,000 remained alive to be taken prisoner. The rest had perished in the brutal fighting, the freezing cold, or from starvation and disease. Few of those taken prisoner would ever see Germany again. The harsh conditions of Soviet captivity meant that many would not survive the war, marking a tragic end for the once proud soldiers of the 6th Army. The victory at Stalingrad came at an unimaginable cost. The battle had raged for 200 days and nights, leaving the city a wasteland of rubble and bones. The exact number of casualties will never be known, but estimates range from 1.7 to 2 million killed, wounded, or captured on both sides. The Soviet people had endured unimaginable suffering. The city that bore their leader's name had become a symbol of their sacrifice and their determination to defeat fascism. The world watched in awe and horror at the scale of the carnage. The Battle of Stalingrad marked a turning point in World War II. The German army, previously invincible, had suffered a catastrophic defeat. Their advance in the east was halted and the initiative passed to the Soviets. Stalingrad also had a profound psychological impact. It showed that Hitler's Germany could be defeated. This gave hope to resistance movements across occupied Europe and boosted the morale of the Allied forces fighting in North Africa and Italy. The world began to believe that a Nazi defeat was possible. Today, Volgograd, as the city was renamed after Stalin's death, stands as a testament to the human spirit's resilience and the horrors of war. The Mamayev Kurgan, a strategic hill that witnessed some of the fiercest fighting, is now a memorial complex dominated by the colossal statue of the Motherland Calls. Stalingrad remains a symbol of the human cost of conflict, a reminder that victory often comes at an unbearable price. This battle on the Volga serves as a warning from history, urging us to seek peace and understanding to prevent such horrors from ever happening again.